Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today in the Dungeon Dive, we have a special top 10, and this top 10 was produced by a Dungeon Dive patron by the name of Tom Cohen. So thank you, Tom, for your support. This is the second of the Patreon produced top 10 lists, and I'm not going to do them anymore because I have deleted that $20 a month tier from the Dungeon Dive Patreon. I personally just thought that I wasn't offering enough to justify $20 a month. So if you want to support the Dungeon Dive, you can at like $1, $3, $5, or $10 a month. You can go to the Dungeon Dive Patreon, and I really do appreciate it. It makes all of this possible. You know, I'm still doing about 30 plus hours a week at the Dungeon Dive. And I'm making a lot of progress on my game, and the Dungeon Dive Patreons, the patrons are helping me get that game made by allowing me to have the time. So this top 10 list is a top 10 curated list. And it's a little bit of a weird thing. So let's talk about that for a minute. Tom and I, we got together on Zoom and we talked about some topics. He had some topic suggestions. And one of the topic suggestions he had was a top 10 kind of desert island games. And, you know, if I could only have 10 games, what would I have? And I wanted to modify that a little bit because I didn't want that to just be my top 10 favorite games. You know, if I was trapped on a desert island with only 10 dungeon crawl or adventure games, I would pick my top 10 games. So I wanted to imagine this list as being from the perspective of somebody paying me to curate a 10-game collection focusing on adventure style and dungeon crawl style games. So, you know, if some very wealthy game player came to me and said, "Hey, Daniel, I want to pay you to curate a top 10 list. What would that be?" And so to kind of move that away from just being my personal favorite games, Tom and I came up together with some categories, and then I came up with some other categories. And so those 10 categories are as follows: something with a narrative campaign, something with an overland map, something with RPG elements, something post-apocalyptic, something science fiction, something for the family, something dark, something small, something with an old school vibe, and something unique. So in each one of these buckets, in each one of these categories, I'm going to give you a few recommendations, and then I will let you know what my number one choice is for this top 10 curated list. So let's start with something unique, something that a lot of people don't think about, a game that often gets overlooked, even by me sometimes, as you'll see on these suggestions here. So a couple of games came to my mind for something unique. You know, you want something in your collection that a lot of other people don't have, or a lot of people don't talk about. And I thought of something like Champions of Horror, right here with the glare, if you can see it behind an image there. So Champions of Horror is a unique kind of game. I've heard it been described as better Mage Knight, if you can believe that. I know a lot of people really love Mage Knight. I am not one of those people, and I really do like Champions of Horror. Also a game, Darkest Night. I've covered Darkest Night before. I've also covered Champions of Horror. Darkest Night is a game that I don't see talked about too often. And it has a really cool kind of co-op vibe, almost pandemic style, but with a neat fantasy setting. But the game I am choosing for something unique is Hand of Fate Ordeals. And that is the special edition from 2018, designed by Barantas, with art by Jesse Gillespie and Ian O'Toole. Now I'm choosing the special edition, and I figured that if somebody was wealthy enough to hire me to curate a 10-game collection, then they would also have enough money to track down this special edition of Hand of Fate Ordeals. So it just comes with more stuff, which adds more variety and more modes to the gameplay. And it comes with the one mode that I like the most, and that is the Endless mode. And the Endless mode, I've covered that before on the channel, but it's kind of a rogue-like mode where you are just trying to survive for as long as you can, moving from one level to the next. So Hand of Fate Ordeals is a deck builder, but it actually feels like an adventure game, and it looks it looks just absolutely amazing. It has such a unique look, a unique feel, has unique mechanisms. And there really isn't anything else like this. You know, there are games like Thunderstone Advance and Thunderstone Quest. And to me, those games don't feel like adventure games at all. There are games like the living card game systems, like the Arkham Horror card game. But to me, that's more of a lifestyle game, not really a board game. But I wanted to think of something where you could just, you don't have to devote your entire life to the game. It's a board game. You can set it up pretty quickly, put it away, store it all in one box. And Hand of Fate Ordeals offers up so many unique qualities that I don't see in a lot of games. And that's why it is on this list. Okay, so the next category is something with an old school vibe. These are anachronistic games that have fallen out of time and arrived in our modern day. And of course, two of the big ones in this category are League of Dungeoneers and Dungeon Universalis, both fantastic games. League of Dungeoneers is basically a kind of modern, it's not even modern, it's kind of just a new Warhammer Quest with some different systems going on. And that will be hitting a reprint soon. And then Dungeon Universalis is basically a super advanced hero quest. And that game is completely out of time right now. And that has a lot going for it and tons of people like that. But the game that I chose for something with an old school vibe is Dungeon Crusade, finally released in 2020, designed by Roger Deering. Now, Roger Deering is an internet friend of mine. We might be working together, so I just want to be completely honest in our relationship. But as time goes by, I like Dungeon Crusade more and more. There just really isn't anything out there with a similar vibe. With its static boards, it kind of feels like Super Hero Quest, but it's totally co-op and solo. There are a ton of random elements, events, lots of things to do in the dungeon from one turn to the next. There is a ton of loot and a whole adventure game, the Avalon Adventure board game that you play before the dungeon crawl game. And now with the Lone Wolf, with the Solo Crusader mode, and with shorter dungeons coming, the main issues that I have with the game are kind of being solved. The game is way too long. I usually play a third of a full game and I feel satisfied. I play one quest table. So in a full game, there are 3 quest tables, and each quest table has 3 quests, 1 main quest and 2 side quests. I just play a game with 1 main quest, 2 side quests. I truncate the leveling up, where I let my heroes level up in a shorter period of time, and I allow my heroes to use more powerful gear before they level up. And I have a complete satisfying experience when I play a game of Dungeon Crusade like that. So Dungeon Crusade is my choice for something with an old school vibe. Okay, the next category is something small. And you guys know I love small box games. I talk about them a lot. I have a whole dedicated playlist to small box games. I am a huge fan of small box adventure and dungeon crawl games, especially those that give a big feel or give a big thematic feel. I think one good example might be something like Fire of Eidolon. And Fire of Eidolon could have actually been an example in the unique game section, just because I don't see people talking about it very often. But it's a cool dungeon crawl game with a very strong pandemic vibe. And then there is a game like Escape the Dark Sector, which is this science fiction kind of random encounter game. And Escape the Dark Sector is actually the advanced version of the game I am choosing for the small box category. And that is Escape the Dark Castle from 2017, designed by Alex Crispin, Thomas Pike, and James Shelton, with art by Alex Crispin. And my God, that art, it is so good. This is a fantastic small box game. All of the expansions, everything for this game fit in that nice, small, kind of small to medium size box. If you ever see that giant, stupid deluxe box version and you think this game is a huge box game, just ignore that. That's one of the dumbest things that has ever been thrust upon the board game community, are these giant box games that have a bunch of empty space, and they're made to hold your sleeved cards. You don't need to sleeve all your games, guys. But yeah, this game, everything, all of the expansions, everything from that deluxe version fits in that small original game. And Dark Castle is practically a party game, and that's the way that I like to play it the most. It's a great way to end a long day of playing more complex and involved games. It's basically random encounter the game, but you do need to work with the other players at the table to overcome the challenges and survive. It's got a fantastic black and white design that screams old school fighting fantasy vibes. So for something small, I choose Escape the Dark Castle. Okay, now we're moving into something dark. And dark can mean a few different things. There are things that are grim dark, that are very kind of nasty. And then there are things that are spooky but get under your skin. For one recommendation in this category, I would look at something like Vagrant Song. I think Vagrant Song is a good choice for this, and kind of an odd choice. It has an odd darkness to it. It's a cartoony darkness, but it is also effectively spooky. And there are things about that game where after you are done going against a haunt or a haint, is that what they're called? A haint? You will feel a little creepy because of what they represent. I think that's a really cool, dark, and spooky game. However, my choice for this category is a game that I have talked about before, and that is Machina Arcana 3rd Edition from 2019, designed by Uri Billick. Yeah, I talk about Machina Arcana 3rd Edition a lot, and it's well deserved. It's a fantastic game. It's such a great game. It truly belongs in a collection like this. It's a bold design with a great art and atmosphere. The pulp style purple prose writing is fantastic. If you like authors like Clark Ashton Smith or A. Merritt or Thomas Ligotti, you're really going to dig the prose vibe found in Machina Arcana. The game can be pretty demanding. It's challenging. There is a lot to learn, and there are a lot of things for the players to do, but it's also very rewarding, adventurous, and fun. When I put myself in the shoes of the explorers in this game, I start to feel a very real sense of dread. And that's why I think it is such a great dark game. Okay, coming up is kind of like the opposite of that last category. This is something for the family, a light game. And I don't just mean light in terms of mechanisms or in terms of upkeep or learning, but light in the vibe that it gets. And I thought of games like Glory 2nd Edition, which is a really fun little adventure game, or games like Horrified or Stranger Things, The Upside Down, maybe a game like Seven Moons. There are a lot of games in this space, and a lot of them are really good, especially with this new kind of proliferation of high quality IP games that you can get at like Target and Walmart. There are a lot of really high quality family light style games out there right now. We're kind of in a golden age of this new kind of space, of this new kind of gateway game space. But for me, the ultimate game in this group is Pauper's Ladder from 2019, designed by Paul Stapleton. Pauper's Ladder is such a charming game, a pure joy to play and experience. The bright, vibrant colors do a lot to create that mood, but so do the various encounters that you have and the characters and the pastoral setting. It's an easy game to learn. It doesn't take up a ton of time, and it has everything that I look for in these kinds of games. And best of all, it fits in a nice medium-sized box, so it doesn't take up a lot of shelf space. Pauper's Ladder really is a win-win-win all around, and that's why it is something that I would recommend for the family weight category. Okay, the next category here is something science fiction. So I don't play a lot of science fiction games. My wheelhouse is fantasy, but I love science fiction. There just doesn't seem to be as many science fiction games in this space as there are fantasy games. So it just makes sense that I would focus more on fantasy games. But sometimes I really crave a good sci-fi game. And one example would be Star Wars Outer Rim with the unfinished business expansion. That game feels like a complete game now, and it's super fun. Another would be Zaya Legends of a Drift System. It's a little light on the thematic qualities and flavor text and interesting encounters, but it's got a great space vibe going on. But for me, for something sci-fi in this top 10 list, I would recommend Space Cadets Away Missions from 2015, designed by Dan Raspler and Al Rose. Space Cadets Away Missions is just pure fun. It's fast playing, super easy to learn and teach. A little long in the setup because of all of the hex tiles that you have to set up, but it's not too long. It's manageable for sure. It has amazing combat and a dice resolution system where you get to choose extra cool things to do when you get multiple successes. I absolutely love that. It really makes you as the players feel like you are in control of these characters and the outcome. It's just so much fun. I love the Ray Punk theme, this kind of NASA core, these NASA men and women fighting little green men from outer space. Just a classic 50s golden age sci-fi kind of thing. And I totally dig that. It packs a ton of game into a single box, and it's good for longtime hobbyists and families who want a little more complexity. So for something sci-fi, I choose Space Cadets Away Mission. Okay, so kind of tangentially related to science fiction, the next category is something post-apocalyptic. I wish there were more post-apocalyptic games in this space, but there are a few really good ones. I think a couple examples might be Defenders of the Last Stand and Fallout with both of the expansions. Both of these are great kind of post-apocalyptic games that do different things. Defenders sometimes feels more like Pandemic or more like a threat management or a tower defense style game than a true Mad Max style adventure game, but the theme is there. Fallout needs both expansions to really shine, but with both of the main expansions, I think it's a really fun game. But for me, in this space, a game that truly feels like a post-apocalyptic adventure game is, of course, Fallen Land from 2017, designed by Sean Cahill and John Longren. And second edition is still crowdfunding. It's coming out soon. You could probably still pre-order it, and I highly recommend it. If you love random encounters, if you love flavor text, if you love loot, building parties of all kinds of crazy characters, and you like rolling dice in the wastelands, it just doesn't get better than Fallen Land. The games can be long, but they have an epic feel and they always are engaging. You're building up your home base, recruiting people into your town, building parties of survivors, sending them out into the wasteland to scavenge, looking for vehicles, all while avoiding mutants, bandits, and radiation. It's just, this game gives me that post-apocalyptic adventure feel better than just about any other game I can imagine. It can be super fiddly and there are a lot of rules. However, it has one of the best rule books I've ever read and great documentation. So it really is just a no-brainer to choose Fallen Lands for the post-apocalyptic group here. Okay, next up is something with RPG elements. Now, a lot of the games that we love at the Dungeon Dive have RPG elements. These are all kind of RPG substitutes. When we went to play D&D and maybe our group couldn't get together, we would gravitate towards something like Talisman because it scratched a similar itch. We had a character, we had loot, we had stats, and we would go on adventures. And most of these games that I cover on the Dungeon Dive are like that, but some feel a little bit more like an RPG. I think a couple games that I could have recommended were Destinies and Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Now, both of these games scratch that RPG itch, mainly because the app acts like a GM. And so the players are just able to have the fun and not have to worry about running the game. These games are huge hits with people whose only RPG experience is in the video game space. They are like video game RPGs on your table. But for this category, I wanted to choose something a little more traditional, a game that you might play with people who have played D&D back in the day, but it's been a long time, and they remember certain things about it. And those certain things might be leveling up or stat tests, stories, loot, monsters, that kind of thing. And for this category, I chose Folklore the Affliction with all the expansions, originally released in 2017, designed by Nick Blaine and Will Donovan. So let's get some caveats out of the way. There are a lot of things going against this game. The sessions can be too long. The combat is not very exciting, especially towards the beginning of the campaign when you don't have a lot of options. The D100 system can be far too swingy, especially when you are getting tiny little +1 or +2 bonuses. This game really should have been a D20 system. I'm not sure what they were thinking. The balance for lower player counts is completely off, and there is a lot of bookkeeping involved in playing the game. Okay, so that's the caveats. That's the bad stuff out of the way. This game really does feel like an RPG in a box, and one of the reasons why is with an experienced player who can act as the GM to house rule those issues away, Folklore easily becomes the exact game that you want for your table, for your players. You can tailor it specifically for the kind of game you want. With the Adventure Creation Toolkit as part of that expansion, you can easily run this like a full RPG, and you don't have to change anything. It has everything you need to do that. All of the stats and mechanisms for skill checks, for leveling up, for crafting. It has overland adventures. It has stuff to do in towns, an expansive bestiary, tons of map tiles for all kinds of different adventures. It has a deck of side quests, a deck of road encounters, of off-road encounters. It has everything you need to really scratch that RPG in a box feel. It can be a little frustrating because of how the good and the bad in this game conflict. But people who really like RPGs are not afraid to tweak and house rule. And because of that, I think the game works. I have actually released my set of Folklore house rules in a nice typed up version to Dungeon Dive patrons, and I know people really like that. Okay, so coming up next is something with an overland map, an overland crawl, an overland adventure game. I love overland adventure games. They're probably my favorite kind of game. I'm making one right now that I hope is a really good one. A game like Touch of Evil or Tales of the Arabian Nights or Dungeon Degenerates or Fortune and Glory would all fit in this category, and all of those would be great recommendations. However, my pick for this top 10 is Eldritch Horror from Fantasy Flight Games, 2013, designed by Corey Konecka and Nikki Valens. So this game, along with a bunch of expansions, Eldritch Horror truly becomes a globe-trotting pulp adventure game of the highest order. It takes all of the best elements from Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, streamlines them just enough to make a difference, adds some things, removes some things, and it's basically a recipe for adventure game perfection. It's got a ton of great art from the Fantasy Flight game archives. It's got tons of encounters, a modular-like system for using expansions, and it utilizes the pulp cosmic horror theme really well. Now, Eldritch Horror doesn't feel Lovecraftian, and that's fine. That's something I talk about a lot on this channel and on my book sister channel, All Fiction is Fantasy. I think people put too much focus on Lovecraft when it comes to cosmic horror, when he was just another chain in the long, he was just another link in the long chain of cosmic horror that went all the way back to Ambrose Bierce and is still being developed today. So Eldritch Horror is far more pulpy than H.P. Lovecraft ever wrote. It's more in line with Brian Lumley's take on things, and I think it's better for it. So for an overland adventure game, my choice is Eldritch Horror with a spattering of expansions. And now the final category for today's top 10 is something with a narrative campaign. So this is one of the most popular subgenres of the adventure/dungeon crawl genre. This niche is super popular in the gaming world right now. People love their narrative campaign games, games with hundreds of thousands of words to read or listen to. I am not one of those people. I don't typically play a lot of very scripted narrative campaign games, but I do recognize their qualities. Games like Gloomhaven or Frosthaven, Jaws of the Lion, Madara, Oathsworn. These are the games that most people who like these kinds of games absolutely love and put in the upper tiers. I think one game that I could have chosen for this category for me as a suggestion to somebody would be Role Player Adventures. It's the one I almost picked. It's a pretty fantastic game with a great feel, but I have one issue with it that I just have a really hard time getting over, and that is the main theme of the narrative and how your characters, the player characters, are working for the man. I just can't get over that. I don't like being these like police in this world. And so that automatically makes, whenever I have a choice to work against the man in that game, I automatically choose that choice and I don't even have to think about it. So it kind of limits the kind of overall adventure that I can have in Role Player Adventures. I wish they would make that game and completely retheme it to where you are just some mercenaries or some bandits or something. I don't know. I just don't like working for the man, especially when the man is some royal king or something. But the game that I chose for this might be a little controversial. It is, I believe, the newest game that I will be mentioning today. And that is a game that I have fallen in love with, and I know that a lot of others have as well. And that is Tales from the Red Dragon Inn 2023, designed by Jeff Bouton, Jennifer Kitzman, Jeff Morrow, and Sam Weller. This is a narrative skirmish game. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon come to life on your tabletop. It's super fun. It's super easy to learn. It's pretty quick to play and set up, and it's just a joy from one turn to the next. It's got a ton of great characters and a diverse cast of characters. Lots of strong female characters in this game, which I've heard many people praise, and I praise it for that as well. The characters are like superheroes, and they get to do all kinds of badass things from one turn to the next. It's vibrant and colorful in its depictions of its settings and in the story that it is telling. It's not overly serious or dark, but it's also not too goofy as to be uninteresting or completely unbelievable. It's got some gravitas to it, even though it is also humorous. If you think in terms of authors, think if you mixed something like Pierce Anthony, Terry Pratchett, and Robert Aspen in terms of tone, but it also has some very well-made, serious, and solid tactical skirmish mechanisms. It's a very, very well-made balance of all kinds of different things, and I think it's a fantastic game. So my game for right now, if I were to curate somebody's collection for something with a narrative campaign, would be Tales from the Red Dragon Inn. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this list. It's a little bit different, a curated top 10. If you want to hire me to curate your your board game collection, yeah, just hit me up and maybe we can work something out. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.